Usually, when you imagine the idyllic German Rhineland, you are anticipating a very specific, deeply romantic aesthetic.
Oh, absolutely. The winding waters of the Rhine, those steep vineyards.
Right. Ancient, crumbling castle ruins overhead. And, well, those quaint, timber-framed houses lining cobblestone streets. You're expecting a landscape defined by deep historical roots and a really tranquil uniformity.
It is a region that thrives on perfectly manicured tradition, really. I mean, anyone visiting expects the scenery to fit perfectly into that picturesque, historic postcard.
Yeah, exactly. Then you decide to take a stroll through a local municipality, just, taking in the serene forest air, and suddenly that postcard is just ripped to shreds.
Completely shredded.
You turn a corner and stumble upon a bright red double-decker British Routemaster bus.
Out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere. And a few steps further, you spot a life-sized figure of Queen Elizabeth sitting on a park bench next to, of all things, a grinning Mr. Bean.
Which is just surreal.
It is. And if that visual collision wasn't jarring enough, you look past a red telephone box and find yourself staring straight down the barrel of a 52-ton military tank draped in Union Jacks.
I mean, you have to imagine looking out your own kitchen window in a quiet German town and seeing a massive armored war machine parked next door.
Right.
It's the absolute definition of a visual and cultural shock.
It really is. So we are jumping straight into an incredibly quirky location in the German Rhineland today called the Little Britain Inn, and it's situated in Vettelschoß. So that is Vettelschoß.
Yeah, Vettelschoß.
And it is very close to the highly historical area of Remagen, that is pronounced Rimanan. And the mission for this deep dive goes far beyond marveling at imported red telephone boxes or chuckling at the sheer volume of British kitsch.
Because there's a lot of kitsch.
Oh, a massive amount. But we are diving into a stack of sources today, from local news features to detailed hotel brochures, to explore the deeply emotional human story of the inn's founder, Gary Blackburn.
His journey is genuinely fascinating.
Yeah.
We are really tracing how a man goes from being an expatriate tree surgeon to becoming an unofficial, highly eccentric ambassador of German-British friendship.
Yeah.
And along the way, we really have to examine a fiercely debated controversy over that 52-ton Centurion tank.
Elephant in the garden.
Exactly. Exploring the incredibly complex question of whether a weapon built for war can ever truly be recontextualized as a monument for peace.
Right. So to understand how a massive military tank ends up parked next to an Agatha Christie-themed hotel room, we have to start with Gary himself. He didn't arrive in Germany with the intention of opening a hospitality empire or a museum.
No, not at all.
He arrived in 1985, originally hailing from Lincolnshire in the UK, bringing a highly specific, highly sought-after skill set. Gary was a trained tree surgeon.
Which is such a niche thing to bring over.
It is. He had actually studied at the Maristwood Agricultural College in Surrey and worked in the legendary Sherwood Forest.
I love that detail. Bringing arboreal expertise from the mythical home of Robin Hood over to the Rhineland. It is a brilliant detail.
It really is.
Because at the time, his specific techniques in arboriculture were quite rare in continental Europe. He wasn't a lumberjack, he wasn't there to cut trees down for timber.
Right.
He was basically a surgeon for ancient monumental trees.
Oh.
Yeah, this involves intricate procedures like crown reduction to relieve stress on older roots, or installing complex cabling and bracing systems to prevent massive, centuries-old limbs from splitting during storms.
So he was literally preserving history. And his skills were in such high demand that he even worked for the Chancellery in Bonn, tending to the government's trees, and he saved ancient specimens at local castles.
Spot on.
He founded a company called Baumdienst Siebengebirge, which grew into a highly respected family business. And today, it is actually run by his sons Kevin, Alexander, Luke, and William, who are all fully trained European tree workers themselves.
So Gary had spent 30 years building a really successful life. He was literally and figuratively deeply rooted in Germany, tending to the landscape, raising a family, and just becoming part of the local fabric.
Yeah, a British man completely integrated into the European project.
Exactly. And then the 2016 Brexit referendum completely rocked his foundation.
Yeah, the sources describe it as a genuine crisis of identity for him. Watching his home country actively pull away from the European community was profoundly distressing.
It makes you wonder how you would react, doesn't it? if the two halves of your identity were suddenly pulled apart by geopolitical forces.
I mean, I sort of compare his response to Brexit to someone packing up their childhood bedroom into a suitcase when moving away.
Oh, that is a great analogy.
Thanks, but he is doing it on a massive architectural scale just to cope with the emotional distance. Gary didn't just write an angry letter to an editor. He began fiercely collecting British memorabilia to create a physical, permanent statement of German-British friendship. He built a sanctuary.
Because when the political landscape becomes fractured and uncertain, human psychology often drives us to create tangible manifestations of unity.
We need something we can touch.
Precisely. Gary wanted to prove, in a physical, undeniable way, that despite whatever legal or political separations were happening in Westminster, the cultural and emotional connection between Britain and Germany was unbroken.
Yeah.
He needed to anchor himself.
His connection to this specific region of Germany, however, wasn't just a random choice of geography. He didn't just find a convenient, cheap plot of land to park some vintage buses.
No, his ties to the area around Rhineland actually date back to his childhood.
Wait, really? How does that work?
Well, as a boy in Britain, Gary was deeply captivated by the 1969 film The Bridge at Rhineland.
Oh, right, the war film.
Yeah, the film depicts the real, harrowing World War II battle for the Ludendorff Bridge, which served as a crucial, desperate crossing point over the Rhine for the Allied forces advancing into Germany. So it was a site of immense historical weight.
And he carried that childhood awareness with him to Germany. Later, as an adult working as a tree surgeon in nearby Erpel, he started connecting deeply with the older locals.
Yeah, he was out there talking to people.
The sources mention he met a former German prisoner of war who confided in him about the surprisingly fair treatment he received while in British captivity.
And another local he befriended was a man named Mr. Bush. During the Allied advance, when Mr. Bush was just a young boy, he had been forced to hide in the dark, damp local tunnels just to survive the bombardment.
Wow, that is intense.
It is. And to add an incredible layer of historical poetry to it, Mr. Bush's own grandfather was the stonemason who had originally built the massive stone towers of the Rhineland Bridge.
Oh, wow, that is amazing. But I am looking at these encounters and I'm pushing back a bit, thinking about the mechanics of how these conversations even happen. Like, how does trimming tree branches lead to international diplomacy and unearthing decades of buried World War II trauma?
It does seem like a leap, doesn't it?
Right. But when you think about the daily reality of a tree surgeon's work, it actually makes perfect sense. You are often working on private historic estates, spending hours in the gardens of older generations.
You are.
You are treating trees that they have watched grow for decades, perhaps trees their parents planted. So you are tending to the roots of a community, quite literally.
It requires an immense amount of trust to let someone operate on a 300-year-old oak tree in your back garden. You are stepping into their private sanctuary.
Exactly.
So when you are a friendly British expat who has just spent the afternoon carefully preserving their cherished landscape, it is very natural for them to invite you onto the patio for a cup of coffee.
Yeah, and in those quiet moments, the conversations inevitably drift towards the history of the land, the scars of the past, and personal memories.
He became a sort of custodian of their stories. It is like examining the rings of an old tree. You can see the years of drought, the years of fire, and the years of healthy growth.
That is a brilliant way of putting it.
Gary was seeing the traumatic rings of this community. And all of these encounters, the stories from the former POW, the harrowing childhood memories of Mr. Bush, coupled with his own profound dismay over the fracturing effects of Brexit, it all culminated in a desire to create a powerful monument.
A grand symbol to represent the overcoming of that dark history.
Right. Which brings us to the monument he chose.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. When most people envision a monument dedicated to peace and friendship, they gravitate towards universally understood symbols. An olive branch, a dove, perhaps two hands shaking cast in bronze.
The usual suspects.
Gary Blackburn decided the ultimate symbol of peace and international friendship was a 1953 British Centurion tank.
A 52-ton military tank. I mean, it is an absolutely staggering decision.
It really is.
He purchased it directly from the Swiss Army for 30,000 euros. And the sources note this actually fulfilled a lifelong dream sparked when he was just 3 years old, after his father gifted him a toy model of a Centurion tank.
So he was committed to this idea.
Clearly. So he buys the real full-size machine and originally places it on his own private property in the town of Uncle.
And Uncle is geographically situated very close to Rhineland. So for the local residents, the sudden appearance of a massive weapon of war in their quiet neighborhood did not exactly evoke feelings of peace.
No, I can't imagine it did.
It sparked a massive, furious backlash. The outrage escalated with such intensity that the dispute actually bypassed local councils and reached the land tag.
The state parliament.
Yes, the state parliament of Rhineland-Palatinate.
But wait, I have to jump in here. Isn't Gary's premise here incredibly tone-deaf?
Oh,
I mean, you can't just drop a 52-ton machine of destruction, a vehicle literally engineered to crush buildings and end lives right near a site of horrific World War II tragedy, paint a Union Jack on it, and magically rebrand it with a peace label.
I see what you mean.
Can intent truly override the visceral, physical reality of a weapon? Surely the reality of it overrides a person's good intentions.
It is a really fair point. But framing this as a study in semiotics, the study of signs and symbols reveals exactly why this clash occurred.
Okay, how so?
Because an object's meaning is entirely dependent on the cultural context of the observer. If we look at Gary's perspective, it aligns perfectly within a British or Allied cultural framework.
Right.
In the UK, as well as in France, Belgium, and the Netherlands, military vehicles from the Allied forces are frequently displayed in town squares, on village greens, and at memorials.
Yeah.
In those specific cultures, a tank is fundamentally viewed as a monument of liberation.
Ah.
It represents the stopping of tyranny. It is a proud symbol of the troops who brought peace back to the continent.
So to a British expat, the tank signals, we stopped the war and now we are friends.
Exactly. But in Germany, the cultural reflex to military hardware is diametrically opposed. A tank on a street corner is not a symbol of liberation. It is a stark, terrifying specter of trauma.
Of course.
It represents the darkest days of the 20th century, the destruction of their cities, and a devastating war that tore their society apart.
So both perspectives are deeply ingrained and entirely valid.
Absolutely. The neighbor's outrage was a completely understandable reaction rooted in generational trauma. And Gary's intention was sincerely rooted in his own cultural understanding of how you commemorate the end of a conflict. It was an immovable cultural collision.
And this profound sociological clash over historical memory quickly devolved into a bizarre bureaucratic gridlock, didn't it?
It really did.
Because the locals were furious, the local municipality had to step in, but local governments don't usually have a zoning ordinance for culturally insensitive military hardware.
No, they certainly do not. The German Baugesetzbuch, or building code, is notoriously thorough, but it is not equipped to settle emotional disputes over historical semiotics.
Right.
So the local authorities needed a legal mechanism to force Gary to remove the tank. They determined that because the 52-ton tank was completely stationary, lacking any independent means of propulsion, it technically qualified as a structure or a building.
A building?
Yeah, and under German law, erecting a building of that size and mass in a residential garden requires a formal building permit, which Gary obviously did not possess.
It is brilliant bureaucratic logic. They are basically saying, we can't legislate your taste in garden ornaments, but we can regulate unpermitted structures.
Exactly.
But Gary's workaround is a stroke of absolute genius. He realized that the entire legal argument rested on the tank being stationary.
Right.
If a stationary tank is legally a building, then a tank capable of independent movement is legally a vehicle, and you do not need a building permit to park a vehicle on your own land.
So he enlisted the help of a mechanically skilled friend named Michael.
This is my favorite part.
Together, they managed to engineer and install an electric motor into the back of this massive vintage war machine.
I mean, think about the absurdity of this. They essentially created the world's first 52-ton e-tank.
An e-tank?
It is like strapping an electric scooter motor onto a bank vault. By giving the tank the physical capability of movement via electric power, it officially bypassed the structural classification of the Baugesetzbuch. It was legally reclassified as a vehicle.
It was a highly unorthodox, wildly inventive legal loophole.
Absolutely brilliant.
However, outsmarting the local council on a technicality does not mend fences with your neighbors.
No, I suppose not.
The friction and tension in Uncle remained palpable. Ultimately, recognizing that his vision required more welcoming environment, Gary moved the tank, along with his rapidly growing collection of British memorabilia, to a new location in Kalundborn, a part of Vettelschoß.
And moving to Vettelschoß is where the project absolutely explodes from a quirky personal collection into a full-blown kitsch kingdom.
It really does.
What started as a man buying a tank to cope with the emotional fallout of Brexit transforms into the Little Britain Inn. When you delve into the details of the hotel brochures, the scale of it is spectacular.
It evolved into a massive hospitality and event space. The hotel features meticulously themed rooms, designed and painted by a talented local artist who goes by the name Andy Mo.
Yeah, you can book a room wrapped in Agatha Christie mysteries, a Sherlock Holmes suite, a Harry Potter room, and of course, a deeply eccentric Mr. Bean room.
Guests are waking up in a completely immersive British cottage atmosphere right in the middle of the Rhineland, and they love it.
They really do. The inn boasts a 9.4 rating on Trivago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you step out of your room and find yourself invited to a traditional afternoon tea served inside a genuine imported Route Master double-decker bus from the 1960s.
And one of the most striking contrasts to the entire operation is the infrastructure powering it. Visually, you are surrounded by mid-century nostalgia, a 1953 tank, 1960s diesel buses, vintage telephone boxes. But beneath the surface, the inn operates on highly modern, hyper-efficient green energy.
Which is such a contrast.
They utilize expansive solar panels to generate their own electricity, they provide Tesla charging stations for their guests, and the entire property is heated using a block heating plant.
Now, I found the block heating plant detail fascinating. For those unfamiliar, a block heating plant or a combined heat and power system is an incredibly efficient way to use energy.
Very efficient.
In a normal engine, say in a car, a huge amount of the energy generated by burning fuel is just wasted as heat blowing out the exhaust pipe.
Yeah, it's just lost.
Exactly. But a block heating plant captures all that waste heat and recycles it.
So the engine generates electricity for the inn, and the heat produced during that process is captured and piped directly into the hotel to warm the rooms and provide hot water for the guests' showers.
That is brilliant.
They also use solar thermal energy. The contrast is remarkable.
Yeah.
You have a 52-ton relic of mid-century industrial warfare sitting quite literally next to a 100% sustainable, closed-loop green energy ecosystem.
It is a perfect metaphor for the whole place, really repurposing the heavy, inefficient machinery of the past into something warm and welcoming for the present.
That is a great way to look at it.
But I want to highlight how Gary handled the lingering skepticism in the wider community after the move. Relocating a tank and building a British theme park in Vettelschoß didn't magically erase all the raised eyebrows from the locals or the local press.
No, integrating a project of this magnitude, which inherently challenges the traditional aesthetic of a German municipality, requires significant diplomacy. If you act aggressively or defensively, the community will simply reject you.
So instead of fighting his critics in the press, writing angry rebuttals, or engaging in endless legal battles, Gary deployed the most powerful disarming weapon in the British cultural arsenal: hospitality.
Hospitality, exactly.
The sources recount a specific incident where he invited his most vocal critics, including the editorial team from the local newspaper, the Westerwald Rundblick, over for a traditional afternoon tea.
It is a masterclass in de-escalation, honestly. He sat them down in his world, surrounded by his collection, and served them freshly baked scones, clotted cream, and tea.
Just brilliant.
He just talked to them, human to human. I mean, it is incredibly difficult to maintain a fiercely antagonistic stance toward a man who is warmly pouring you a cup of Earl Grey and offering you jam.
It really is.
He used the universal language of sharing food to dissolve the tension, answer their questions, and build community consensus from the ground up.
Tea diplomacy. It is simple, yet profoundly effective.
Absolutely.
When we step back and look at the entire arc of this deep dive, the journey is astonishing. We have a highly skilled expat tree surgeon spending decades carefully preserving the ancient forests of the Rhineland.
Then the political shockwave of Brexit hits, fracturing his sense of home and triggering a deep personal identity crisis.
Right. And he answers that geopolitical crisis by physically constructing a miniature United Kingdom in Germany.
Along the way, he navigates a complex web of World War II historical trauma, inadvertently triggering a state-level political controversy over the semiotics of a Centurion tank placed far too close to the tragic history of Remagen.
And then he beats the strict German building bureaucracy by strapping an electric motor to a war machine, transforming it into the world's heaviest e-vehicle, and ultimately builds a 9.4 star-rated cultural bridge in Vettelschoß.
It is quite the resume.
He took his anxiety over a divided Europe and transformed it into a vibrant, wildly eccentric, and deeply welcoming embassy of German-British friendship.
It serves as a profound testament to the human desire for connection and rootedness. And I think it leaves you with a fascinating thought to ponder, really.
What's that?
Well, if a 52-ton machine built for destruction can be mechanically and symbolically retrofitted into a monument of peace, And a quirky, kitsch-filled hotel can successfully serve as a diplomatic embassy. What seemingly immovable conflicts in our own lives might be resolved simply by shifting our context.
That is a great question.
Or perhaps, what heavy burdens might be lifted just by sitting down with our critics for a simple cup of tea.
It is a brilliant reminder that sometimes the heaviest obstacles can be moved if you apply a little ingenuity and a lot of warmth. Our weekly podcasts are created voluntarily. If you like our podcast, please support us by 1, following and 2, sharing. We would be happy to get more reach. Thank you.